the armed forces from the Spanish-American War to the Persian Gulf, providing food, shelter, and supplies to disaster victims of the 1881 Thumb Fires, through Hurricane Hugo and the Northern California earthquakes, fulfilling the urgent needs of the medical community with the nation's premier blood supply. The American Red Cross is trained, dedicated people you can count on. We are neighbors like you, committed to help people prevent, prepare for, and cope with emergencies right now. From the Bay, Saginaw, and Genesee Lapeer chapters, here is the latest news and information from your American Red Cross.
Good morning and welcome to Red Cross Currents. My name is Billy Ray Bates and I'm a volunteer with the Saginaw County chapter of the American Red Cross. And we know how the Red Cross responds to emergencies with physical help, with food and clothing and shelter for disaster victims, with precious blood for those who are injured. Well, in today's edition of Currents, we're going to learn about a way that the Red Cross responds with emotional help as well. At the end of World War II in 1945, Nazi Germany had killed 6 million of the 8 million Jews in Europe. About 1 million of those victims were children. Nazis also killed members of other ethnic groups, such as Polish citizens and gypsies. This Holocaust, as it was called, was part of Adolf Hitler's plan for world domination, and during it, the Nazis kept their actions as secret as possible. Now, 50 years later, the family members of many of those victims still don't know how, when, or where their loved ones died. When we come back, we're going to learn the story of a brave woman who lost her parents during the Holocaust and who put the pieces together through the Red Cross. Welcome back to Red Cross Currents. We're going to take a look right now at the story of Emmy Mogilensky. She's a survivor of the World War II Holocaust who found help through the Red Cross.
This work of art represents and memorializes all of the children who were among the 6 million victims of the Holocaust. Besides those who lost their lives during this time of horror, there are countless others whose lives were profoundly altered. Emmy Mogilensky was one of those children.
I was born in a small village in Germany, in Bavaria. There were perhaps 15 to 20 Jewish families. My father served in the German army in World War I. He won the Iron Cross. You get the usual story of someone who cannot believe what is happening, refuses to believe it, and cannot make himself pick up and leave and move to another country. The first time that I was aware that the Nazis had, or the power of the Nazis had reached our small village, which up until then had really been sort of isolated from all of this, was when I went with my friends on our bicycles to go to the movies in the next town. I suddenly realized that my friends had become very quiet when we got to the movie house. And when I looked up, I saw that there was a large sign over the movie house, over the cashier's desk, which said, "No Jews allowed." And my friends said, "Come on in anyway, nobody will know that you are Jewish." And I said, "No, if I'm not wanted, I won't go in." And I got back on my bike and I went home. And all the way home, I kept saying to myself, why? What happened? What did I do? What did I do that I couldn't go to the movies anymore? And when I got home, I spoke to my parents about it. And my father said that, "Don't worry about it. It will probably blow over. it's nothing to worry about. Some weeks later, we went to school, and my teacher had organized the children, who had been our best friends the day before, to form two lines in front of the school. And as my brother and I tried to walk through the lines to get to the front door of the school, the children beat us up. We were asked to leave our house, and we moved to Augsburg, where we were able to stay for a little while. While we were there, we heard that there were children's transports, trains filled with children that were leaving to different parts of the world. A number of them left for England, and my parents were asked if they would like to put one of us on a children's transport. They said they agreed, and they decided that I should be the one to go because I was 14 going on 15, and once you were 15 you were too old to leave, and so they decided that I should be the one to leave. It wasn't really until we were at the train station, and my parents had put me on the train together with 500 other children, no adults. And I looked out through the train window and saw how frozen they were, that I realized that I would never see them again, and that they knew that we would never see each other again. But by that time it was too late to do anything. The train began to move, and that was that. My brother came over to England on a similar transport in August 1939, and by September 39 the war broke out. All mail between England and Germany stopped, and now we weren't even able to correspond with our parents. And it took some months before finally the Red Cross stepped in and allowed us to send 25 words a month to our parents, and the following months they were able to send 25 words to us. There were special forms which the Red Cross issued to us. It said 25 words, a 25-word message would be transmitted, and that's what we had to limit them to. It crossed international borders, it crossed the war zones, and that's where the Red Cross was extremely useful and extremely helpful. That was the way that we corresponded for quite some time, until one of our messages that we had sent to Germany, to our parents, was returned to us with a stamp across it which said, "Addressee unknown." That was the Nazis' code to say that they had been deported. And for years we didn't know what had happened to them. It is difficult for me to describe to you the pain of not knowing what has happened to people. My brother came to the United States long before I did, and he initiated a search, again, into the International Red Cross Search Center to find out what happened to them. I have here the original message that we got from the Red Cross, which tells us, it's dated June 28, 1946, and it tells us that my parents had been deported to a concentration camp outside of Lublin at the beginning of 1943, and both have died in the concentration camp. It is hard to say how we felt when we got that message. But basically, after the shock had worn off and after we had sort of comforted ourselves, it served as a closure. It served as a real comfort to know that we now knew what had happened to them. They no longer were suffering. They were out of their misery, and it became a sort of finalizing. And as I said, that was a tremendous comfort to us. When I speak to children's groups now, and I do very often, I ask them to imagine what it would be like if all that they could say to their parents would be 25 words, and that they would have to wait 2 months before an answer of 25 words could come to them. And I particularly tell them that if they are ever tempted to give their parents the silent treatment, to remember me and remember my story.
Emmy Mogilensky's relationship to the Red Cross began when she was barely 15 years old, and now she serves on the board at the Holocaust and War Victims Tracing and Information Center located in Baltimore. Here with me today on the show to talk more about that and about the tracing system in general is Melissa Pike. She's Director of Emergency Services for the Saginaw County Red Cross. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. First of all, in the most general terms, can you tell us what is the center in Baltimore called the War Victims Tracing Center? Can you explain to us what happens there?
Sure. That center is specifically set up to deal with requests from within the United States for information for Holocaust victims or people who were involved in and possibly incarcerated in concentration camps during World War II. So that agency deals specifically with the World War II time period.
How many years has the Red Cross had this tracing service?
Tracing services has existed in varied forms since the Red Cross was created. The Holocaust and War Victims Tracing Center has been in place since about 1990. The center itself opened in 1991, late 91.
Now, we've been focusing on the World War II Holocaust, but what other historical events does this tracing service focus on? What other historical events, if someone knows someone that was involved in that event, what other events are there that they can find information on?
Basically, the Red Cross can help to locate any people who are victims of any type of war, civil disturbance, any of that. There is also tracing that we can do, for instance, for Amerasian children who were separated from their fathers during the Vietnam War. Anytime that there is any type of war or battle going on, then Red Cross gets involved in tracing services.
What other organizations is the National Red Cross affiliated with that help out with this?
The primary way that we get involved in tracing is by going through the International Federation of Red Cross, Red Crescent Societies, which the American Red Cross is affiliated with. Much of the tracing is centered in our offices in Geneva, Switzerland. But different countries, based on the situations there, may have their own offices that we then network with in order to find answers for people.
Okay. To offer this kind of service, the Red Cross must have access to a lot of different kinds of information. Where does the Red Cross get its information for this?
Well, it depends on the situation. The Holocaust and War Victims Tracing Center was opened only after access to records that had never been available to us before became available. With other countries, they may be looking at government records, records from prisoner of war camps, concentration camps, detention centers, whatever might be operating there. The Red Cross has access to those in most situations.
From what I understand, around the year 1990, the former Soviet Union released a lot of pertinent information for this service. They released hundreds of thousands of names of Holocaust victims, and naturally then interest in the service increased.
Absolutely.
How many inquiries has the Red Cross nationally received for this tracing service since then, since about 1990?
I don't have the specific numbers, but it's in the tens of thousands of requests that have happened here within the United States. Yeah, that information that was released was actually not released in a very organized form. It was a whole lot of books, papers, manuscripts, and those then have all been, well, most have been entered into a computer to date, but also as new records come, they have to be dealt with by hand. But
a lot of people may wonder, of all of those inquiries, of everyone who wants to trace someone that they knew who was involved in the Holocaust, for instance, how many of those situations turn out to be happy endings, where they actually find someone who they didn't realize it, but they're still alive and there's a family reunion?
actually, those are the minority of cases. Unfortunately, due to the great loss of life during, in particular in World War II, there are many more unhappy, not necessarily unexpected answers, but there are very few that are actually able to be connected with both parties having survived. There are then also cases where people might have survived the actual war but have since passed because of just old age. And that actually gives people a good feeling, too, to know, okay, at least they made it through there, you know, and they lived till they were 70 years old, but, you know, survived that incident. And that gives people some peace, too.
To bring this closer to home, how many people in the state of Michigan have used this tracing service?
You know, I don't know that. We are trying to get a handle on that locally, but, or on a statewide level, we have a military and international social services committee within the state of Michigan, and we're trying to get a handle on that. Unfortunately, because of so many chapters existing within the state, it's hard to really know what has happened with everyone. So it's a difficult thing to pin down.
I imagine if you wanted to take just Saginaw County, that'd be even harder to gauge the interest in just this area in the tracing service.
It is. We've, in the 4 years that I've been with the chapter, we've received about half a dozen requests for tracing, some of them for multiple family members. But also, we have not been doing a lot of marketing of this availability. And I'm certain that number will increase as people become more aware that it exists, and also as people become aware that while tracing can still take a considerable period of time, it is shortening as more and more documents are being entered into the computer and being more readily accessible.
If someone who lives in Saginaw County right now, or even any of the surrounding counties, wants to trace someone, wants to use this service, do they have to contact the center in Baltimore, or can they go through their local chapter?
Actually, they should start with their local chapter. Every chapter of the Red Cross, it does assist with tracing services. Some have less experience than others in it, but all of us have the capability to do that. So
we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to find out more about the actual tracing process. Welcome back to Red Cross Currents. We are talking about the Red Cross's system for tracing victims of the World War II Holocaust. And with me today is Melissa Pike. She's Director of Emergency Services for the Saginaw County Red Cross. And we were just talking about the process of tracing an individual, the fact that if you live around this area, even in Saginaw County, you would want to contact your local chapter instead of the national center in Baltimore. Now, Melissa, what is the very first step that someone takes if they want to trace someone that they knew? What is the very, very first thing that they have to do?
The very first thing that they should do is call their local chapter of the Red Cross to set up an appointment. The application that has to be filled out is quite lengthy, and it's very important to have an appointment for it so that you can make sure that the business can be attended to on your first visit. Then when you come to that appointment, it's very important to bring with you any information you would have regarding possible, no matter how far-fetched, whereabouts of the individual that's being sought. To make sure to try to write down any information, any rumor someone might have had, you know, and a family story that this is what happened to them, because all of those may be ultimately leads that will take the Red Cross exactly where it needs to be. So that's very important, to come into that prepared and really focused on remembering as much as you can, either facts or just stories that the family is told.
What's the least amount of information that the Red Cross can go on? Can they actually trace from just a name?
That becomes very difficult. One thing that really needs to be remembered is that while a name may seem unusual compared to names within the United States, when you get into other countries, names that would be considered unusual here are not so rare in the countries they're going to. The more information that can be provided, the better. In fact, our forms ask for things like the sought person, the one we're looking for, their parents' names, including mother's maiden name, the occupation they had or might have had, just nitty-gritty details about who that person was. So the more information, the greater the chances of a successful search.
What happens when the person has provided the information of the Red Cross? What happens next?
Then we forward it, if it's a World War II case, we forward it to the Holocaust and War Victims Tracing Center. If it is not related to that time period, then we forward it to the International Tracing Services, which is at our national headquarters. Then it gets processed from there. And with the Holocaust and War Victims Tracing Center, those requests are input into a computer, which contains the information that has been translated from those documents that were released from the Soviet Union, as well as a number of other resources that have been available. That is the first step. However, sometimes things aren't found in the computers. The information may not have been entered yet. Also then go through a hand search of documents that may not have been transcribed yet. It very much is a process of individuals providing the help, which is what takes the greatest period of time. That's why it can be such a lengthy process, is because there's humans on the other end doing the searching.
Sounds like there's a lot of paperwork that's involved. I know at least on the Red Cross's end. What about with the person who is searching? You mentioned an application. Is there any other paperwork besides that?
No, that would be it. That's all that's required. That's all that we do forward on. However, if they have any other documents that might show any family history, we suggest they bring them to the initial application appointment, because there may be information from there that they may not think is significant, but that may be appropriate to share with the authorities who'll be doing the search.
How long does the process take?
That depends. If we're dealing with a current conflict, we may be able to have a response back to them within a few months. It certainly is not an exceedingly fast process. Some of the Holocaust cases, I had just received a reply on one that had been filed approximately 2 years ago. So that is very lengthy. And again, the reason is not all documents have been transcribed yet. And as new materials become available, they look at old cases that might have been held, or old requests for information that might have been held for a long time. They'll try to filter in the old cases and see if that will bring about a match. So it can be a several years process.
Okay, what happens if the Red Cross absolutely can't find any information on this individual? What happens if the search comes up empty?
We receive a reply back saying what has been done, what records have been checked, and what the results of that were. If there are no other options available, that will also state, it will list other agencies that may be dealing with Holocaust victims or may be dealing with the situation in the former Yugoslavia or such. It will give names and phone numbers, ways to contact other organizations that may be able to provide help directly to those family members.
That's about all the time that we have for this edition of Currents. If you would like more information on the Holocaust tracing service that the Red Cross provides, you can contact your local chapter. We have a list of phone numbers that we're going to show you. And this is where you can call. You can call up Melissa in the Saginaw County chapter at 754-8181 if you want to know more about this from this area. Maybe the most important thing that we learned from Emmy Mogilensky is how difficult the pain is when you don't know what's happened to your loved one. The Red Cross has provided a very crucial emotional link for thousands of people across the country. That's all for now. Thanks.